The knock at midnight. The wind pushed through the dry grass like whispers of something lost. Night had fallen hard on the outskirts of the colony, and John Ward sat alone in his cabin, the only light coming from the dying fire in the corner. Farmhouse creaked with age. His dog, Rusty, lay curled beside the hearth, occasionally twitching in sleep. Outside, rain tapped against the tin roof, soft and steady. John was half asleep in his chair, a mug of cold tea in his hand, when the knock came. It wasn't loud. It didn't demand, just a soft rhythm against wood, like someone asking without hope. Rusty lifted his head, ears perked. He didn't bark. He growled low, uncertain. John blinked, sat up, and stared at the front door. No one ever came this far out. He liked it that way. Even delivery drones didn't bother anymore. Too far off-grid, too quiet. He placed the mug down, reached for the old shotgun leaning by the wall. It wasn't loaded. It hadn't been for years, but it was heavy, and sometimes that was enough. The knock came again. He stepped slowly to the door, eyes narrowing. He undid the latch and pulled it open with a cautious hand, and there she was, tall, thin, soaked from head to toe. Her skin shimmered, pale lavender in the moonlight, and her long black hair stuck to her cheeks, dripping. She wasn't human, not even close. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and her voice, when she spoke, was more breath than sound. "I will warm your bed, human," she said. "My children need a father." John stared at her, at the two smaller figures standing behind her children, alien too, but younger. One boy, one girl. The girl clutched a bundle of cloth close to her chest. Their faces were expressionless, but afraid. They didn't move. They just looked up at him, waiting like they had nowhere else to go. "What did you just say?" he managed. The woman bowed her head, rain dripping from her brow. "I mean no offense. I ask only for shelter, for warmth, for help." John looked past her. The night was pitch black, the storm growing stronger. No lights, no ship, no road. Just wind, water, and these three strangers on his doorstep. He lowered the shotgun. "What's your name?" The woman hesitated. "Alari." He looked at the children. "They're yours." She nodded once. "Their father is gone." John exhaled, and stepped aside. "Come in." She didn't smile, didn't thank him. She just entered with quiet grace, guiding the children inside. Their soaked feet left prints on the wooden floor. John moved fast, grabbing towels, the spare thermal blanket, and some old clothes that might fit. The kids sat near the fire, staring into it like it might give them answers. Alari knelt beside them, hands on their shoulders, eyes flicking toward, every sound like a soldier scanning for threats. John made tea, hot water and dried herbs, nothing fancy. He poured 3 cups, placed one gently in front of her. She took it with both hands and nodded. "Thank you." He leaned against the counter. "Why here? Why me?" She looked at him over the steam. "Of the cup, I heard of you. You do not send strangers away." He gave a humorless chuckle. "You heard wrong. I like being alone." She tilted her head, her eyes almost amused. "But you let us in." He didn't reply. The fire burned lower. The storm outside howled like something wounded. The children wrapped themselves in their blankets and drifted into uneasy sleep. Alari didn't move. She sat cross-legged on the floor, her back straight, eyes on the flames. John watched her from the chair, something strange stirring in his chest. She didn't ask for more, didn't beg, didn't cry, just stayed there silent and steady, like a tree growing out of broken ground. Eventually, he stood and added another log to the fire. Then he looked at her. "You can stay the night. Tomorrow we'll figure things out." She didn't bow, didn't speak. She simply nodded once. That was enough. He retreated to his room, but didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind, wondering what the hell he'd just let into his home. But part of him already knew. Not a threat, not an intruder, something else entirely. A fire that didn't go out. Morning came quietly, like it was afraid to disturb them. A pale gray light seeped in through the rain-streaked windows of John's cabin. The storm had passed, but its scent still lingered, wood, damp earth, and something else. Something foreign. John stood on the porch with a cup of black coffee cooling in his hands. His gaze stretched across the empty field, the soil dark with rain. Rusty lay curled beside him, ears twitching with every gust of wind. Still alert, still wary. Behind him, the house was quiet. He hadn't heard the kids stir. No sounds from Alari either. He stepped back inside and found her sitting cross-legged beside the fireplace. Just as he'd left her, her robe was dry now, draped over her like a memory. Her long hair had been combed back into a neat braid, and Her silver eyes were half closed. The children were still asleep, curled beneath the blanket like twin roots growing into the floor. John stepped around them, set the coffee on the table, and cracked 3 eggs into a pan. He added the last of the old bread to toast on the edge of the stovetop, trying not to think about how many mouths there were now. He plated the food and brought it to her in silence. She opened her eyes, blinked at the tray, and bowed her head, slightly. "Thank you," she said. "You don't have to keep saying that," he replied. "I do," she said softly. "No one else ever let me in." He pulled a chair closer and sat, sipping his coffee as she tore the bread into small pieces, and ate carefully, like she didn't trust it wouldn't be taken away again. "You said their father was gone," John said finally. She nodded. "Solon, he was strong, brave. We were trying to leave the war. He thought we could disappear somewhere quiet." John leaned back. "You mean the border war?" "Yes. We were heading for Thruza Neutral Moon. He thought it was safe, but there were patrols. Not yours, not mine, just killers." "What happened?" "They found us before we could land." He shielded the escape pod with his body. Her voice cracked slightly. "He burned in the blast. I watched it happen. They didn't even try to confirm the kill. They just left." John said nothing. The coffee in his mug had gone cold. "I went back to my people," she continued. "But they called me a traitor's mate, a widow with half-blood children. Solon's father was human." John blinked. "Your children are half human," she nodded. "That made us ghosts to my people, unseen, unwanted. So they didn't take you in." "No, they turned us away. Some even spit on my son, said he was proof of impurity." John's jaw clenched. "And then you came here." "I had heard stories of a man who once took in a broken dog, fed it, kept it warm. I thought, maybe he would do the same for us." John glanced down at Rusty, now snoring under the table. "That dog bit me twice when I brought him in." Alari raised an eyebrow. "I do not bite." John laughed a short, dry chuckle that surprised them both. She tilted her head. Was that humor, maybe? The girl stirred first. She sat up, eyes still heavy with sleep, and looked straight at John. "Are you the human?" she asked. John blinked. Yeah, I guess so. You're taller than I thought." Hira Alari chided gently, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "It's fine," John said, cracking a grin. "I get that a lot." The girl smiled, just a little, a flicker of something normal in the strangeness of it all. "Haven't laughed in weeks," Alari whispered. John looked at them, 2 small lives who didn't ask for war, who didn't ask to be here, but they were, and somehow now they were his problem, and part of him didn't mind. Later that day, John showed them the shed out back. It had been used to store tools, spare planks, and scraps of wiring. He cleared it out, laid down blankets, arranged a small heater in the corner, and brought them an old crate as a table. "It's not much," he said. Alari stood in the doorway, arms folded around herself. "You didn't have to do this. I know. Why are you helping us?" John looked up at the sky. "Because I've been alone too long." He glanced at her, "and now I'm not." That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Alari stood near the window, staring out at the stars like they owed her something. John handed her a cup of tea. "You ever going to tell them the full story?" She didn't turn from the glass. "One day, when they're ready, when I'm ready." John nodded. "Take your time." Outside, the sky stretched on forever. Inside, in the soft glow of the firelight, a widow stood quietly beside a man who hadn't realized how empty he wasn't. Someone knocked and filled the silence with hope. Eyes that watched a closely word traveled faster than John expected. By sunrise the next day, the colony already knew. The whispers had started in town before he even stepped into the general store. You didn't need satellites or data logs for news to spread here, just old men with sharp eyes and women with long memories. John stepped through the store's creaky front door, and immediately felt it. Silence. Half-second stares. Then the sound of someone pretending not to whisper. He grabbed a few things: eggs, oil, a new filter for the water pump, and brought them to the counter. Old Clyde stood behind the register, arms crossed, lips pressed so thin they nearly vanished. "You letting one of them live in your shed, John?" John didn't answer. He just looked Clyde in the eye and held it. "She's got kids too, I hear," Clyde added, voice colder now. "That true?" John laid the credits down on the counter. "You want to ring that up or just keep gossiping?" Clyde scanned the items without a word. When he handed back the receipt, he said, "You're making a mistake maybe," John said, "but it's my mistake to make." The walk back to the farm felt longer than usual. The air was heavy. Every bird call, every gust of wind seemed to carry weight. Suspicion. He didn't like it. He didn't care for eyes that watched too closely. When he arrived, Alari was kneeling beside Rusty with a cracked metal bowl in her lap, gently dropping bits of dried meat into it. Her silver eyes watched the dog as if expecting rejection. Rusty sniffed once, then licked the meat, then her hand, then wagged his tail. John paused on the porch, watching them. She looked up, startled. Her smile, small and uncertain, disappeared the second she realized he'd seen her. "I fed him," she said quickly, as if expecting to be scolded. "I see that. He was hungry. He's always hungry." She stood, brushing dust from her robe. "He licked my hand." "Then you passed the real test," John said, stepping down from the porch. "Rusty doesn't lick just anyone." Alari exhaled, not quite a sigh, not quite a laugh, just something caught between relief and exhaustion. The children played nearby, making up games with sticks and pebbles, their laughter like small music, weaving through the dry air. She joined him on the porch steps. They sat without touching, just the weight of presence between them. "People stare when you go to town," she said softly. "They always stared," John replied. "Because you are alone." He paused. "Because I liked it that way." She nodded. "You are not alone now." He didn't reply. Later that afternoon, an old hovercart rumbled down the dirt path toward his land. John recognized the driver before it even stopped. Mr. Harlan, mid-70s, sharp nose, voice like gravel, a man who'd served on the first colonist council and never forgot it. The cart came to a halt just beyond the gate. Harlan didn't step off. He just leaned from his seat, hands on the console. "I heard you've got company, Ward." John leaned against the fence, arms crossed. "Yeah, what about it?" "Alien kind. You know what that means. Trouble." "She's not trouble. They never look like it, until they are." "She's got kids. That's even worse." "You get attached." "You already attached to your hovercart?" John asked, cool and steady. "Maybe we should take that away too." Harlan didn't laugh. "You think you're doing something noble, but all you're doing is painting a target. If someone's aiming, let them aim at me. You're risking everything, then let me." Harlan stared a moment longer, then kicked the cart back into gear and drove off without another word. Alari had heard it all. She stood near the cabin's door, arms folded, eyes shadowed. "I should leave," she said when John returned. "No, you're risking everything. So are you." She stepped closer. "Why do you keep defending me?" John looked at her, steady and unflinching. "Because you fed my dog." She blinked, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means you care. It means you're not what they think. You're not a threat, Alari, you're just tired." Her gaze softened, her silver eyes dimmed slightly. "I am very tired." That night, dinner was simple stew, salt bread, and for the first time, shared space at the table. The children sat on either side of John. Alari across from him, quiet but watching. He poured her a mug of warm water steeped with herbs. She accepted it with both hands. "What is this?" she asked. "It's called peace." She brought it to her lips, breathed in the steam, and closed her eyes. "It tastes like home." John didn't smile, but he held her gaze longer than before. And this time, she didn't look away. Outside, the stars stretched overhead, cold and silent. Somewhere people still whispered. Somewhere danger still waited. But in this old wooden house at the edge of nowhere, a widow fed a dog, a human man poured tea, two children laughed at a joke about the stars, and for one more night they belonged. A visit with bad intentions. The days passed, quiet but taut. Allar. I helped more around the homestead, tending to the garden with strange but effective alien techniques that made the crops grow stronger. She taught the children how to filter water, with layered stones and crushed moss. John pretended not to be impressed, but he watched her hands, her eyes, the way she moved with quiet confidence. Every day she looked less like a visitor and more like part of the land. Still, the silence outside the property line wasn't peace. It was a storm gathering. John had always lived on the edge of the colony, of society, of human tolerance, but now he wasn't the only one at risk. When he walked into town, people stopped talking. When he left the store, they started again. The stares didn't bother him. What bothered him were the quiet conversations he couldn't hear. That unease finally arrived in the form of 4 men. That it was just after midday. The sun blazed overhead, casting long shadows across the field. John was chopping wood out by the fence when he heard the whine of wheels over gravel. He turned. 4 men on rugged dirt bikes and an old patrol. A TV stopped just beyond the boundary line. Dust curled around them. None wore uniforms, but that didn't matter. Their postures said everything. John didn't move. He planted the axe into the chopping block and walked forward slowly, wiping his hands on his shirt. The one in front, a thick-necked man with short buzzed hair and a scar across his cheek, stepped down first. "Ward," he called out. "Got a minute?" John didn't smile. You're already on my land. Might as well speak your piece. Buzzcott stepped forward. Name's Mercer. Security detail. Volunteer branch, meaning unofficial muscle with guns. Mercer smirked, meaning we keep the colony clean, safe, and lately folks have been uneasy. John crossed his arms. Because of a widow and 2 kids. Because they're not like us. John's voice stayed even. They're more like us than most folks I've met. The other men laughed quietly behind Mercer. One of them tapped a baton against his boot. Mercer stepped closer, lowering his voice. Look, we don't want trouble. But if she's dangerous, if her kids are some kind of sleeper program, or if she's hiding tech, then you're harboring risk. That makes you part of it. John didn't flinch. You come out here to lecture me? No. Mercer's face hardened. We came to see them. Not happening. Mercer leaned in. John, don't be stupid. If they're clean, we walk away. But if they're not better, we find out now, right? Before they hurt somebody. I've seen them cry over burned toast, John said flatly. They're not sleeper agents. That's what they said about the last alien who went rogue on Eridus 3. You remember the body count? John's hands curled into fists at his side. Mercer tilted his head. You gonna stop us? John didn't answer. Mercer took another step. A sharp sound cut through the air, not from John but from the porch. Allar. I stood there, a gleaming tool in her hand, not a weapon but shaped like one. The children stood behind her, half hidden by the frame. Her hair flowed in the wind, her silver eyes blazed. You come closer, she said calmly, and I will defend my children. Mercer froze. John took one step forward and stood between them. You take another inch and I won't stop her. Mercer studied the scene. 1 human man, 1 alien woman, 2 children, 1 piece of twisted farm equipment raised like a blade, and something about it made him hesitate. He spat into the dirt. You'll regret this. John nodded. I've regretted worse. Mercer turned without another word. The bikes fired up, one by one, and they rolled away in a cloud of grit and anger. John stood still until the dust faded. Alari slowly lowered the tool. Her arms trembled not from fear, but from fury barely held back. Her breathing was shallow. I will not let them take my children, she said. You won't have to, John replied. Not while I'm standing. She looked at him, lips parted like she wanted to say more, but instead she walked inside. The door closed quietly behind her. That night, John sat by the fire, watching the flames dance like old memories. The children had fallen asleep in the corner, curled together like seeds beneath the soil. Alari sat across from him. Her hands rested in her lap. For a long while, she said nothing. Then, quietly, I was ready to die on that porch. John looked at her. I know. She finally met his eyes. You stood between me and death. Why? He stared into the fire, then shrugged. Because that's what fathers do. She blinked slowly, as if trying to understand the meaning. As if the word father carried more gravity than she could bear. I'm not asking anything of you, she whispered. I know, he said, but that doesn't mean I won't give it. The fire crackled. Outside the night pressed against the windows, but inside, something stronger was forming. Not a promise, not a duty, a bond. And neither war nor whispers would tear it apart. The line we draw the following morning. The land was quiet but not at peace. John walked the boundary line with a worn wrench in hand, tightening the solar conduits feeding power to the outer fence. They'd never needed it active before. But now, he checked the lines twice a day. The faint hum in the wires was a new sound, one that didn't belong in his peaceful life, but had become necessary. The security men hadn't returned. Not yet, but he knew they would. The colony didn't forget, and it didn't forgive. Inside, Alari was teaching Hira and Rallan how to cook, using human tools. Rallan, the boy, had taken to mixing spices like it was art, measuring by scent and feeling instead of numbers. Hira preferred order. Her portions were exact, like she was assembling a science formula instead of a stew. John chuckled as he listened to them argue over the proper temperature for frying vegetables, that it was the kind of sound he hadn't heard in years. Joy. Life. Normal. But beneath it all was a tight coil in his chest, a readiness. Because peace, this good doesn't last. Not out here. Not with the kinds of people who looked at Alari and saw a threat instead of a mother. That afternoon, the knock came again. Not Mercer this time. It was softer, civilized, measured. John opened the door to find a woman standing there in a long coat with colony colors stitched into the collar. Talia Cree, council representative. Mr. Ward, she said politely. Might we talk? John stepped aside. You want tea? I'd prefer honesty. You'll get both. She followed him inside, eyes scanning every corner. Her gaze lingered on the children's toys near the hearth. She didn't smile, didn't frown, just took in the evidence. Alari stood by the kitchen, one hand resting gently on Hara's shoulder. The girl didn't cower. She stared at Talia with defiance beyond her years. You have beautiful children, Talia said neutrally. Thank you, Alari replied, voice even. John gestured to the table. Sit. Talia took her seat and placed a small tablet on the wood. It glowed softly with a colony emblem spinning in the center. We're not here to punish anyone, she began, but your decision to harbor undocumented xenocitizens has sparked concern, official concern. John didn't answer. Talia glanced at the children. No papers, no scans, no background check, no clearance to reside on colony-owned land. You understand that puts both you and them at legal risk. I understand bureaucracy, John said flatly. I also understand when someone needs help. Then you understand this is bigger than just you. Bigger than protecting 2 kids. Talia paused. We've had incidents before, John, you know that. Alien refugees bringing unknown tech, cultural conflicts, even biological contamination. We're just asking you to report it, to register them, let us do a proper intake. And then what? Alari asked, stepping forward. What happens after your intake? Interrogation, quarantine, my children taken for study while I'm processed like a virus. Talia's expression didn't change. I'm not here to threaten you, but I am here to remind you that this colony survives because of order, not emotion. John stood. Then, maybe order's lost its humanity. Talia gathered her things. You have 48 hours to present them to the colony intake center. If you don't, enforcement will follow. She paused at the door. I know you're a good man, John. Don't make us treat you like a criminal. Then she left. Alari didn't speak for a long time. The room was still, heavy with unspoken fear. The children had gone silent. Rallan clung to Alari's robe. Hira looked at John like he might have answers. He didn't. Not yet. That night Alari sat outside beneath the stars. John joined her with 2 mugs of weak tea. They drank in silence until the mug was nearly empty. She wants to take them, Alari said finally. She wants to process you. They always use soft words before. Hard actions, John nodded. I've run before, she whispered. I can run again. I just don't want to anymore. John looked up at the stars. Maybe this time we hold the line. She turned to him. Even if it means standing against your own kind. I'm not standing for anyone who breaks families apart. A faint wind rustled the grass. Alari set her mug down. You've given us shelter, food, safety. But if you go further, if you fight for us, they'll mark you forever. John looked at her then, not just at the woman, but at what she carried. A dead mate, 2 frightened children, a name thrown out by her own people. And still, she stood tall. I've been marked by loneliness for years, he said. I'd rather carry something real. She reached across the space between them and placed her hand gently on his. Not romantic, not dramatic, just quiet trust. I will not let them take what we've built, she said. John closed his fingers over hers. Then they'll have to get through both of us. Inside the house, the fire still burned. Outside, the line had been drawn, and this time he wouldn't step back. Her secret heart. John didn't sleep that night. Even after the fire died down and the silence of the land returned, his mind was alive, turning over the conversation with Talia, remembering Mercer's threat, and thinking about the 2 small lives under his roof that he had somehow grown fiercely protective of. He sat on the porch in a coat, sipping cooled tea that had long lost its warmth. Rusty lay nearby, ears flicking occasionally at the night breeze. Stars blinked above in their usual distant indifference. Alari came outside just before dawn. She didn't speak. She just sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, and looked toward the trees on the horizon. I never told you what I used to be, she said quietly. John glanced at her but said nothing. I wasn't just a mate or a mother, she continued. I was a record keeper. In my culture, that meant I held not just knowledge but truth. Everything from lore to history to bloodlines. She looked at him then, eyes shimmering in the moonlight. I carry stories. Things my people have chosen to forget. Things your people never knew. John raised an eyebrow. What kind of things? She hesitated. My children are not just half human, they are more. John stiffened slightly. What do you mean, more? My mate Solon wasn't just part human. He was an engineered hybrid, part of a union project meant to bridge the biological gap between species, created in secret, protected in silence. When the program was shut down, the survivors were scattered, because someone got scared. Because someone got scared, because someone got jealous. Her voice grew harder. The hybrids weren't weaker, they were stronger, healthier, sharper. able to survive more environments, and to some, that made them dangerous. John rubbed the back of his neck. And you're saying your kids? They were born naturally, but they carry the same traits: stronger immunity, emotional depth beyond most, and the ability to process both alien and human languages with terrifying speed. John's eyes drifted toward the window, where faint light from the hearth still glowed. Inside, Rallan had once disassembled an old comm device and reassembled it into a translator within hours. Hira had memorized an entire almanac after skimming it once. You think that's why they're coming? John asked. Because of what your kids might be. Alari nodded. They'll say it's for order, safety, protocol, but underneath, it's fear. Fear of what might come if we live and grow freely. John exhaled slowly. Then we make it clear we're not running. She looked at him, a strange hope flickering in her eyes. You say we so easily now. I stopped meaning just me the day you fed Rusty, he said with a faint smile. She smiled back. Small, tired, but real. Then she stood. I want to show you something. They walked together to the edge of the shed where she'd been storing her salvaged belongings. Inside, beneath blankets and bits of scrap, she pulled out a thin, silver disc and handed it to him. He turned it over, an old-style data crystal, nearly obsolete by Earth standards. This contains the original files of the Bridge project, she said. Names, DNA strands, research logs. Some of your people were involved. If the Colony Council ever gets their hands on this, they'll use it as a weapon, John finished grimly. They'll justify anything with it. Then we hide it. No, she said. We give it to the right person. John narrowed his eyes. Who? Your brother? John blinked. My brother died in the Earth-Mars riots. No, he was rescued, recruited. He works for Unity Intelligence. Now he's alive. John took a step back, stunned. How the hell do you know that Alari's gaze didn't waver? Because he once questioned me on Hades Station. He didn't know who I was then, but I remembered his voice. John was quiet, his fists clenched slowly. I thought I buried that part of my life, he muttered. She stepped forward. Maybe it's time to dig it up. They stood in silence for a moment. Then John nodded. If I send the data, I'll paint a bigger target on us. Or you'll buy us time, she said. They walked back to the house in the blue light of prejudice. The children were still asleep. Rusty trailed behind them with lazy steps. John uploaded the data to a secure packet and routed it through an old satellite channel he hadn't touched in years, encrypted. Anonymous, bouncing through at least a dozen dead servers before transmission. He sent it to a name he hadn't said out loud in over a decade. Caleb Ward. When it was done, he sat back and looked at Alari. It started, he said. Yes, she whispered. Now we see who answers first. Your brother, or the ones who want to bury the truth. John reached for her hand, and this time she didn't hesitate. Outside, the wind began to rise. Inside, they stood shoulder to shoulder. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. We stay. The sun never rose gently in that part of the colony. It pierced through the trees like a spotlight, bold and blinding. But today, its warmth felt heavier. John stepped onto the porch with a rifle slung over his shoulder, not for hunting, but for warning. Beside him stood Alari. Tall, unbending. In the field. Her children ran through the tall grass, laughter rising like birdsong. For now, they were still free, but it was coming. John had felt it all night, the growing stillness in the town, the urgent messages blinking on his receiver, the one final communication from Councilwoman Talia. This is your final chance. If you do not comply by sunrise, we will take custody. He didn't answer. They would come anyway, and come they did. By mid-morning, a black skimmer hummed over the hill, flanked by 2 scout bikes. Dust kicked up like a ghost returning. The hovercraft glided down just beyond John's field. Doors hissed, open for soldiers stepped out heavily armed, faces covered, protocols locked in. Talia Cree followed behind them, wearing a polished vest and that familiar expression of colonial reason, cool, clean, and deeply dangerous. John stepped off the porch slowly, his boots crunching the gravel. This is your home, she called across the wind. But you do not earn the law. I never asked to. Then don't stand in its way. The soldiers fanned out. Behind John, Rusty growled low. Inside, Hira and Rallan peeked through the window, eyes wide but silent. Alari stood tall, her fingers clenched around a simple wrench. She was still not armed, but she no longer needed to be. John raised a hand. Talia, let's speak. No weapons, no force. Talia signaled. 2 soldiers halted. The other 2 kept moving slowly, approaching the house. John's voice rose. This land is under private sovereignty per Article 9. That sovereignty ends when you violate interspecies safety protocols. Those protocols were written by men who never looked into the eyes of a child. Talia frowned. And you trust them over your own species? John stepped forward. No, I trust them because my species has failed too many times. She tilted her head. So you'll fight us? If I must. Talia's eyes hardened. She signaled again. The two soldiers at the door moved in. Alari stepped down from the porch. Between them and her children, John raised the rifle. Not to shoot, just to make a point. Take another step, he said, and I will fire. The moment was still tense. No one breathed then. From above, a deep thrumming filled the sky. A second ship appeared, sleek, dark gray, and unmistakably off. It bore no colony insignia, no registration. It hovered above them like judgment made steel. Talia stepped back, stunned. The soldiers flinched, unsure whether to aim or run. The side hatch opened. A voice echoed through the airwaves. John Ward, stand by for contact. John lowered the rifle, blinking in disbelief. A figure descended, tall, lean, human, dressed in black field gear with a silver Unity badge pinned to his chest. John froze. His voice cracked as he whispered, ... Caleb. His brother nodded, eyes scanning the scene with practiced precision. I got your signal, Caleb said as he stepped between the two forces. And the data, the entire Unity board did. Your guest is under full protection. Talia's face twisted. You're interfering with internal colony matters. Caleb turned to her. I'm invoking interspecies humanitarian preservation, code 7 Delta. You make one move, and this turns into a galaxy-level diplomatic violation. Talia sputtered, but said nothing. Caleb turned to John, his face softer now. You always find trouble. I don't find it, John muttered. It knocks on my door. Caleb stepped to Alari and offered a slight bow. You and your children are safe. No one will touch you now. Alari bowed her head in return, her voice quiet. Thank you. We don't want war, just a home. You've got one, Caleb said, right here. Talia's skimmer lifted off in retreat minutes later. No fight, no final threat, just silent failure. And John watched them go, his shoulders heavier but his heart, for the first time in years, lighter. Later, when the sun dipped below the hills, and Caleb had departed with a promise to watch their backs, John sat with Alari under the old tree by the fields. The kids ran nearby, chasing fireflies. You could have gone with him, John said. Lived on a better planet, safer colony. She shook her head. I already found my place. John smiled. It's not much. It's everything, she whispered. He turned to her. I was a man content with silence. Now I dread it. She leaned in. Then let's fill it. Together, they didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Their hands found each other, fingers interlacing like roots, and in that moment, with the stars above and the threat behind them, an alien widow and a human farmer did something rare. They stayed.